Hello everyone and welcome to the Topical Hour. The Last of Us television adaptation came out and everyone who doesn't play video games finally got to experience the story. So was the show worth it? Well, yes and no. I want to start by saying that if the show and the game came out at the same time, I think everyone would agree that the show does it better, but that might just be because the game came out first. Regardless, I think the show is better than the game for a few reasons. To begin with, we have so much more time to focus on the characters. Every single episode focuses on something different, with the first being world building, the second being Tess, the third being Bill and Frank, the fourth being a rare instance of just Joel and Ellie, the fifth being Sam and Henry and Kathleen, who I'll talk about more later, the sixth being Ellie and Riley, and the seventh being Joel and Tommy, and the eighth being David and his people. Each episode is a new opportunity to dive into characters we didn't get much of in the game. For example, making David a man of God and some kind of leader before he smacks the girl in the face was a cool way of maybe saying that he won't be as bad in this version, but he's obviously worse. My point is, without a bunch of gameplay complicating the story, all we have is our characters, and they're done very well. Ellie is just as biting as she needs to be in this. In fact, I was a little bit skeptical about Bella Ramsey at first, seeing as Game of Thrones and The Last of Us are acted quite differently, but after the scene with David and her moments with Riley, I do understand why she was given the role. She works incredibly alongside Pedro Pascal, more on him later. Tommy was okay, it's not that he wasn't acted well, I just didn't really get any outstanding moments for him. Hopefully that changes when they start adapting part 2. Henry and Sam are also done outstandingly, but I won't dwell on them because they're basically the same as in the game. Although I do like Henry's doubting of his actions to save his brother, and it gets a little bit sadder when you realize he sacrificed someone else for his brother only to have both of them die anyway, both by his own actions. Kathleen is also okay, but I wish there was a little bit more ambiguity to her character. Once she shoots the doctor, you know who you're dealing with, especially when she says she would prefer to kill the children rather than let things go. There's not a ton of room for interpretation, she's just very static. Great for an original character though. Then obviously the episode everyone was talking about. Bill and Frank's relationship is quite a bit of a departure from the game, as it's not implied anymore. We get almost an entire episode devoted to them. I have problems with this, but I'll talk about the good stuff first. It really feels cool to see a story that doesn't end horrifically, but it still ends up being quite sad. The devotion these two people have to each other is one of the few stories where nobody dies in this universe, at least horrifically, and it's made more interesting by the fact that it ends differently from the game, meaning that everyone got to see something new during this episode. However, the beginning is a little bit hard to believe. Like, if Bill was a girl and some dirty guy came around and seduced her in the way Frank did, we'd all see that as some kind of trap. And there were definitely times where it felt like if this relationship wasn't two dudes, it wouldn't play the same way with audiences, but everyone just kind of brushes it off because it's a gay relationship on TV. I'm just saying that we shouldn't put it past a little bit of criticism. But there's still not much I could say that makes this episode bad or anything, and the performances from the two actors were easily the best part of the experience. And, yes, we're working backwards here, Tess is also kind of the same as the game, which is what I was hoping, but I do think you get a little bit more subtext in her relationship with Joel. And her death feels a bit more earned, because now she's not only someone dying in a horrific way, but she's also someone we've grown to like dying in a horrific way. We're gonna pause the video now to talk about Left Behind, which ironically is a big problem I have with it. It kind of pauses the main story to give more context to Ellie's character, and it doesn't really function the same as the game, where we kind of just switch back and forth over time. Here we start with present, go to Left Behind, and then go back to present at the end. It feels a little bit debilitating on the pace, and because it's just two kids, I think some of the dialogue and interactions are a bit strange. It also feels like a lot of meandering to fill out the runtime evenly. I just personally didn't like this episode, and while Riley's actress did an okay job, her lines tended to be a bit weird sometimes. But back to Joel himself, I think I like this Joel a lot more than the one in the game. His character is a lot more morally gray in this show, whereas game Joel is pretty much just a bad person. We only see Joel do a few bad things in this show, when he kills the two resort raiders even though they did what he wanted, and the hospital scene. Everything else is pretty defensible, but killing two men in a way that makes it seem like he enjoyed it is a bit harder to defend. But then we get to the hospital scene, where the music takes over the audio and we're forced to watch an unstoppable force mow down humanity's last hope, one by one. He kills a man who surrenders, he kills one of the world's last doctors, and I was honestly shocked that he didn't kill the nurses. After losing Sarah so many years ago, Joel is now hoarding Ellie for himself, not even allowing her to know about it so he doesn't have to experience the same loss all over again. And the person that sent them on that mission in the first place, Marlene, he executes her at even the thought of her coming for Ellie again. It's good, and the ending came and went a little fast, but it was still a great adaptation. This leads me back to my original thought. The show is better than the game, but also a bit worse. To start with how it's better and worse at the same time, we have to talk about the infected. The show finally made the infected something scary again. The games made them kind of meaningless, as the only mechanic they have is running towards you and attacking somehow. But here you can absolutely see why the world ended because of these things, judging from how easily they take down people sometimes. But perversely, the infected are also a bit of an issue, because now they can't really be a threat. If it's a problem for our characters to face down a clicker or like 2 normal infected, then they can barely ever face them. What I mean to say is that the infected are so powerful our characters can't really fight them that often, or it'll be weird that they keep winning against such a strong enemy. So yes, the infected are scary again, but we don't get to see a lot of them anyway. I also think that the final episode, or I guess the climax, is also better and worse. In the game, you don't really get a lot of time to process what you're doing in the hospital, because from a gameplay perspective, you're just trying to stay alive at that point. But in the show, the music goes full force and takes over the scene as Joel, albeit at a slow and steady pace, patiently annihilates everyone in the hospital. We get to see that selfishness and the way it was originally intended a bit better, but it's also kind of short. In the game, there's a bit of time between the hospital and the credits, but in the show, the hospital scene happens, there's a bit of dialogue, and then it's literally over. It just doesn't get enough time to breathe. By the way, this is your reminder to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Carry on. Other than that, though, this is a solid show. The infected are scary again, the raiders feel a lot more human. I wish there was a bit more gun variety like the game, but this is still a fantastic adaptation that benefits from having the game come first. And I really hope the coming seasons capitalize more on the potential of this universe rather than keeping it so safe. I mean, even Kathleen was a great caricature in that she's basically the reverse of Joel. A loved one of hers died and she wouldn't respect his dying wish, whereas Joel wouldn't respect Ellie's dying wish even though she didn't get a chance to make it. But back to the number score, this show gets an 8.5 out of 10. It's extremely solid and I enjoyed watching. Anyway, nothing's stopping you from liking the video and subscribing to the channel, so do that. Or not, that's fine. Play nice, people.